Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this special planning meeting. So I'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. I'll read a land acknowledgement. As visitors on this land, the town of Bradford, Gwillimbury acknowledges that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, which includes Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, collectively known as the Three Powers Confederacy. We recognize that the Huron-Wendat, Chippewa, and Haudenosaunee nations have walked on this territory over time. In times of great change, we recognize more than ever the importance of honoring Indigenous history and culture and are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation, respect, and good health for all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. All right, we're on to Section 2, the adoption of the agenda. So I have a recommendation that the Special Council agenda dated April 29, 2025 be adopted as printed. Moved by Councillor Verkuyk, seconded by Councillor Dykey. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. The declaration of community interest in the general nature, if you find yourself in that position, you can declare at that time. Seeing none right now. We have Councillor Dehaney is joining us virtually. She's away right now, I think. So, all right, we're on to public information meeting. The town initiated zoning bylaw amendments. So the introduction. This meeting is a statutory public meeting held pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to discuss amendments to the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw 2010-50. The amendments are in order to conform with provincial and municipal legislation in relation to permissions for barrier-free parking standards and to update and modernize provisions relating to accessory farm employee accommodations, height for accessory dwellings in residential zones, and restrictions on residential dwellings in countryside zones. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to speak throughout the staff presentation. Comments presented at this public meeting are being recorded by staff. Personal information is being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Questions regarding the collection and use of personal information should be directed to the clerk. If a person or public body does not make oral submission at a public meeting or make written submissions to the town of Bradford before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to do so. So we're at Section 4.2, the application. It is the planning report. Planning staff will now present the contents of the staff report. Please note that the staff report being presented by staff represents the town's initial zoning bylaw amendments. The presentation by staff will contain an overview of the amendments, an update on comments received to date. It does not include a recommendation on the proposal. Town staff will provide a report at a later date, which will also reflect and consider the public comments made during the public meeting and written submissions received before the report is written. So, considering the public meeting, it is in relation to 5 different zoning bylaw amendments. We will pause to allow for public comment following each proposed amendment. So at that time, please provide your name, speak directly into the microphone. So I will pass it to Priscilla to start with the first presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Council and members of the public. Thank you for attending this evening public meeting regarding the proposed Town Initiative General Zoning Bylaw amendments. So on the next slide, we're just going to go for a brief overview of what we're presenting today. So we're going to look into the introduction about the proposal, as well as discuss the purpose of the public meeting, the posting of the public notices, the proposed amendments. As Mr. Chair mentioned, 5 will be evaluated, and after each proposal, we're going to look at what is being proposed associated with the comments received to date, and pause afterwards for public comments as well as comments from the council. Following that, we'll proceed to the next amendments that we have lined up. And lastly, we'll go through a few remarks, final notes associated to the proposal. So on the next slide, we'll see the introduction. So we were directed by Council on August 6th of 2024 to proceed with public consultation in regards to 5 proposed zoning bylaw amendments. This includes accessible parking, accessory building and structure heights, proposed farm employee accommodation, agricultural zone residential dwelling, as well as marsh agricultural zone residential dwelling. On the next slide are the public notices. So as regulated by the Planning Act, we are required to have public notices, and it was done so on the town initiative's website, as well as Bradford Today on April 9th of this year. On the notices as well, we did have a website that would provide additional information regarding the amendments that the public would also be able to comment should they have any. On the next slide is the purpose of the public meeting. So staff is here to present the information and to invite any questions and comments regarding the proposal. So council will not be making a decision tonight. And once we receive the comments received from tonight, as well as the ones received from the circulation, we'll be coming back with a recommendation report. If anyone is interested in providing comments or to be updated with when this will be going back to council, you can certainly email me at plan@town.bwg. Please include your full name as well as municipal address in the email. On the next slide is the first topic in terms of proposed bylaw, which is the accessible parking. So Accessibility Ontario is guided by the AODA, also known as the Accessibility for Ontario's Disabilities Act. It's a law focused on creating accessible and inclusive environment for everyone in Ontario. And the town recognizes the importance of this act with the creation of the Accessible Bylaw 2019-2022. Currently, accessible zoning requirement does not meet the currently accessible zoning requirements does not meet the requirements in the AODA, and the proposed amendment would align with both the AODA and the accessible bylaw. So on the map on the left in orange, you can see all the areas that is affected, which is basically the entirety of the town. So the changes proposed for this bylaw includes new definition. So that is barrier-free parking spaces, the two types of parking spaces identified by the AODA, as well as the aisle barrier-free space that's required for each parking space. On the next slide, you'll see what is being proposed. So that it shows the two different types, type A as well as type B of the parking space, which is a requirement that we would need to include. So within section 5.43, it would include the dimensions. In addition to this area, we would also include the location of where it should be placed, as well as additional information, update the signing requirements as well. As well, we would like to introduce an additional clause to ensure the highest level of accessibility for a person with a disability in the event of a conflict that would arise in terms of policy. An example, for example, was in the town bylaw was the addition of the medical office that required 10% to be barrier-free. So it is something that we want to integrate as well within the current zoning bylaw proposal. And in the next slide, it's just the last additions that would say how many of type A and type B would be required for the proposal, as well as an introduction to a special provision showing that in the event that there's an uneven number of type A and type B parking space, the odd number representing parking space would be dedicated to type A, which is the most accessible space. And in terms of the comments that received, as of date, we received it from Enbridge, Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, and VCA, BWG Fire, as well as BWG Corporate Services. At this time, they identified no concerns or objections. And we also identified that no comments were received from the public regarding these amendments. And next slide, please. So this would conclude the first proposal, and will be open for comments and questions following this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So now we will open it up to comments from the public. So please provide your name, speak directly into the microphone. If residents have a written or prepared statement, please submit that to the clerk upon completion of your presentation. So I will make a first call to speak to the accessibility parking issue that's up right now. I will make a second call for anybody who wants to comment on this section of the zoning bylaw. It's pretty standard. We're just getting into our zoning. It's a good one, so it's a benefit for our community. And the third and final call. Okay, I will turn this to council. Council, do you have any questions or concerns? I'll go to Councilor Giordano first, and then Councilor Kike.
Just wondering if maybe somebody from the staff can come up and just, my question is when in regards to development, a lot of times you go into these parking lots, I can't even get out of a standard car with my family with trying to shimmy my way through without trying to hit the other car's door. So I definitely support, this process. My concern is in the development section. When people go to do new construction, especially in the commercial, industrial, office areas, everything else, when they go to do site plan, the town always comes back, we need more parking, more parking, more parking. And then that takes up more space, eats up more environmentals. It requires a lot more cost for the developers in order to try to shimmy their property around in order to accommodate for the amount of parking spaces, and then these take up additional spaces. So is there some sort of consideration? The more they go with these type of spaces, is it in lieu of other spaces, or are they just cannibalizing more of the green space that's around the buildings?
For you, Mr. Chair, so I'd like to give a bit of background. So in terms of the current zoning bylaw, so the requirement for accessibility parking is actually 4.4 meters. So it's greater for some, but it averages out to the same. So type A is 2.4. So without a parking aisle, that'll be 3.9 meters. And in terms of type B, with a parking aisle, that'll be 4.9. So in a sense, we're not changing what's required. It has a different variation in terms of type A and type B. With the need of the parking aisle as well. So it can be shared between parking spaces. Currently, right now, each one would have an individual one based on that size requirement. So in a sense, you are saving a bit of space depending on how you arrange it.
Yeah, perfect. That's what I was trying to say. So you're technically optimizing by utilizing those channels between every other one, and then that way they're partnering up, let's say, on those aisles. It's not a double space. Okay, just want to make sure.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Burkite.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is only affecting new builds and new parking lots. People aren't going to have to rip up their existing parking lots and change things, right? It's just for new?
For you, Mr. Chair, so yes, that's correct. It will be assessed for new developments. So when application does come in, we'll be looking at it at that time.
Scott?
Thanks. So that prompts another question. Have we done any analysis as to whether the town-owned parking lots would even be compliant with our own change? Because I could see grandfathering in private businesses, but we might be held to that standard under the AODA, and I frankly have no idea what that would cost, so I'm just curious.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Through your worship to Councillor Scott. The short answer is that existing established parking areas would not need to change as a result of this proposed amendment. Going forward, new developments would be able to benefit from these new provisions, and any changes to existing developments would also be subject if the change prompts an increase in the need for more parking. But that said, just to provide some additional context, the changes, as Priscilla had shared, would provide greater flexibility by not requiring as much width for parking spaces with the new provisions relative to existing. Currently, every single barrier-free parking space has to be at least 4.4 meters wide. There's no opportunity to share a 1.5 meter aisle in the middle. We actually did the math this afternoon. If you do 4 spaces side by side with shared aisles, our current zoning bylaw would require that consume 17.6 meters in width. AODA standards would result in 14.6 meters in width for 4 parking spaces, 2 type A's, 2 type B's, with shared 1.5 meter aisles between. But no change to existing legally established parking areas.
Okay. Further comments? Councilor Harper?
You just touched on one of my questions there regards to none of them will be changed now in regards to the accessibility standards that we do have. And then my question was, is it 2 type A's, 2 type B's for new developments that we have right now, or the new ones that do come? Because the report doesn't really say how many are required. So how would we know what that would be?
Thank you, Councillor Harper, and for you, Mr. Chair. So in the draft zoning bylaw that was attached to report, it refers to table 5.4. The table itself goes and breaks down to a number of parking spaces as required for the parking lot area. For example, if it's a 1 to 12 parking spaces, it would require 1 type A parking. As you go down and increase the number, that number changes and determines how many is required for each case.
That answer your question, Councilor Harper? Yeah. And it gets to the point where it says if we have an odd number of handicap parking spaces, we would go with 2 and 2 and then 1 extra for the, right? It's shared. It's A and B shared, and we get to odd number, it becomes an A, I think. So, okay. Further comments or questions for this? Okay, I think we're done with that section then. Thank you very much. And Priscilla, you can move on to section 2, which is accessory building and structure heights.
All right, so the next topic is accessory buildings and structure heights. So detached accessory buildings are recognized as buildings that are subordinate to the primary use on the lot. So within a residential context, that could be in the form of a garage or a shed. And in the comparison of BWG with different municipalities, we looked at how those heights compare. And we compared it with 8 municipalities. So that includes Bradford, West Gwillimbury, Aurora, Barrie, East Gwillimbury, Ennisville, King, Newmarket, as well as Springwater. So in BWG, we saw there was a 3 meters height for R1, R2, and R3 zone, and a 5-meter height for R4 and the ER zone. Within the other municipalities, they had a height range from 3.5 meters to 5 meters, with a median height of 4.5 meters. So we are proposing to increase the height to 4 meters. This would be below the median of the 7 other municipalities, which is 4.5. It provides greater flexibility to residents, and it will be non-compromising to the prominence of the primary residential dwellings use. And in terms, so in the map that you see on the left, it shows the settlement areas that has the R1, R2, and as well as the R3 zone. In terms of the comments received, Enbridge, NVCA, BWG Fire, as well as BWG Corporate Services, again, had no comments regarding this proposal, and no comments were also received from the public at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So I again turn to the public. If you have any comments or questions, please come to the mic, state your name and address, and if you have written submission, please, at the end of your presentation, pass it off to the clerk. So I will make a first call for anybody who wants to comment on the accessory building and structure height zoning bylaw change. You, sir, come up to the mic, state your name and address. And
greetings, everyone. My name is Steve Antonarakis, Grand Central Area, Ward 1. Is this in accordance with the ADU? Is this a separate entity?
We'll have. I should have the staff answered. I'll have them answered for me. Yeah, just wait and come on up, Alan. I'm sorry. We should keep you guys up here at least, and you can stay there, Steve, if you have a follow-up question.
Through your worship to this gentleman, the short answer would be that this would only apply to detached accessory buildings that do not contain habitable space. Detached buildings that contain an accessory dwelling unit would be subject to other provisions that have been in development and consultation through a separate process.
Thank you, Alan. I could. So no, it does not deal with ADA or AUDs or whatever.
Alan and staff, may I get an example of was it a garage? If someone wanted to increase the size of a garage, what other examples would be of a real life example of what would be on the property that needed, and why has that changed? Is there a necessity for something higher? Has that been something from the public that's been asking, or is that something more for, anyways, yeah.
Sure thing. Thank you. Through your worship to this gentleman. So we attempt to be mindful of the types of variances that come through the Committee of Adjustment and what the basis for the variances are and how well they accommodate community needs. Certainly an increase in detached building height has been the subject of recent variance applications. That prompted a scan of some other jurisdictions nearby, and through the report that was presented to Council last August and the research that went behind that for the ADU building, or the accessory building height, not ADU, we found that the town's current limit to 3 meters was an outlier on the low side relative to other jurisdictions, which were generally between 4 to 4.5 meters. A recent example of a variance included the need to increase the height of the building such that the roof trusses were high enough to be able to fit a mobility vehicle within an enclosed building. Given the elevation height needs and the infrastructure required for that type of vehicle, it pushed the building height such that the trusses were higher than and the midpoint to the roof was higher than the 3 meters. So that's an example of something that prompted the suggestion to council that that be an area for review and consultation through a proposed amendment that we're presenting here this evening.
Thank you for that. So Steve, you're good? Yep. Thank you. All right. And now I will call for any other public that would like to comment on the accessory building and structure height. If you want to do me a favor, just take that to the kitchen, Steve. Take that to the kitchen so nobody drinks out of it. Right where Alan went. Any other public want to comment in regards to the accessory building and structure height? And a third and final call for the accessory building and structure height. Okay, seeing none, I turn over to council. Any questions by council? I'll start over here. Councillor Harper.
I have a comment in regards to a story there for a resident that asked us, was there a need for residents that would like this? One of my constituents, his wife is put into, a condition where she has to be in a wheelchair for remainder of her life. He wanted to build a garage, and he had to tear down the old one because he got a new vehicle that had the taller mandate to hold a wheelchair with a ramp and whatnot. When he had to build his garage, he was held to this 3 meter standard, and the trusses there wouldn't hold this type of vehicle, so he had to actually really specially design this garage. Fortunately, this garage has already gone up, and this bylaw, it's unfortunate that it's a year too late, but for those moving forward that wish to have that accessibility for their loved ones or love support in regards to a specialty vehicle, this is where that will come in handy. So I'm happy that we found there is a deficiency in regards to the bylaw in regards to the height, and it supports other municipalities that we're keeping in line with that. We've done a couple of those bylaws over our term in regards to seeing some of that have been outdated, and then we're trying to update them as much as we can. So I appreciate the staff's work on this and bringing this forward to us. This is the one that's actually going to, make an impact and a difference for those that actually need the support. Thank you.
Yes, great example. Thank you. Councillor Giordano.
This question's for staff, so I don't know if you guys want to make your way over to the mic again. My question is, it's more for my clarity. The garages on a larger lot in town and stuff like that, for sure, the extra height makes sense. I'm not really opposed to any of that. My concern, and I'd like some clarification now, is on these 32, 36, 38, 40-foot lots that we have in town, which is the majority of the subdivisions, and the townhomes as well. Can we have sheds that are 4 meters tall, or pool cabanas, or everything else that in these tiny postage-size backyards, it's already shed heaven in a lot of these places? Will this actually be even larger and taller and blocking out people's backyards even more now? I wasn't 100% clear on this, so I'd just like to get your take on that.
Certainly. Through your worship to Councillor Giordano, the short answer is that should this proposed amendment be accepted by council, the short answer would be yes. However, the proposed amendment doesn't change another provision which would actually subject an accessory building height that exceeds 3 meters to a greater interior side and rear yard setback than an accessory building that is 3 meters or less. So if you go up to 3 meters, you'd be allowed to go, I believe it's up to 0.6 meters, 2 feet from the side or rear lot line. Between 3 and 4 meters, other provisions would kick in that would require a 4-foot setback for a building up to 4 meters high. So there is a different tiered threshold there.
Yeah, so I was assuming that was the case, but you know, having a deadly man cold, if anybody's ever had one, you know that your brain's not all 100% there, and we're on life support with the family. So I wanted to wait till today to ask that question and make sure I got it 100% clear, because that was my biggest issue, is that it's great when you have those 40, 50, 60, 100-foot lots in town. Doesn't really matter, but when not doesn't matter, but it's not an issue like it would be on the subdivisions side of things, right? Where my only other concern is that even with the 4-foot setbacks, let's say, and my assumption was in the past, you could easily just go to committee of adjustments, get that dealt with, correct? And then that could have been, you could just go through the committee of adjustments, it gets passed, you could have the extra height. Now that we make this a blanket, my issue is that sure, it works on paper, but are people going to follow it, and can we enforce it? Because I can tell you that there's still people building stuff illegally and wrong all through the town, and it doesn't get enforced. So that's my other issue with this, is that you set a height, and if we can't enforce it, it only stops the good players, not the bad players.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Giordano. Whether the provision would be 4 meters or 3 meters, if the footprint is at a size that triggers a building permit, the building permit wouldn't be issued if it doesn't comply, or if they don't otherwise get an approval from the Committee of Adjustment for a minor variance. To your point on folks who may choose to construct something that does not comply, we certainly don't monitor all activities occurring everywhere in town, and sometimes learn about them reactively, sometimes through other means. But where things are identified, certainly non-compliance would be cause for action. Whether it's, again, discovered by complaint or building staff going around and seeing construction activity occurring, affords them the chance, I understand, to ask the question.
Okay, and I've got Councillor Harper again. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for answering that question. It's along the same lines there, Alan, in regards to the bylaw, the flexibility of it. If someone had to get a permit, do they have to prove that it's for accessibility, or they just have to meet that the requirement of the height that is allotted? Because it'll go to either a planning part and then the building department as well. Could you clarify that for us?
Sure thing. Through your worship to Councillor Harper, if the current provision is 3 meters, someone could certainly apply for variance. If they don't comply, they wouldn't obtain the building permit in the absence of a variance. The proposal for the increase in height does originate from a combination of recent variance applications that have been presented to the Committee of Adjustment successfully, as well as what followed from that, the jurisdictional cross-section review, where we did find that the maximum height permissions for accessory buildings in BWG, again, were an outlier on the low side relative to other comparative jurisdictions who generally allow 4 meters, 4.5 meters, some allow 5 meters. It does vary. And these provisions, as presented, would apply to the R1, R2, and R3 zones, which are only apply to lands within the Bradford urban area boundary. For larger lots in the rural, agricultural, estate residential area, they would have different accessory building and height provisions that apply altogether. One more point that I would make as well is that, as presented, the amendment does not seek to alter the maximum lot coverage provisions for accessory buildings. which currently sits, I believe, at 15% of the area of the lot. That's not proposed to be changed through this draft bylaw tonight.
Sorry, Alan, I appreciate the breakdown in there. Somewhere in there, I think I lost the answer to my question. Do they have to prove any type of accessory establishment to it? Like, do they need it for any type of like certain circumstances when they're applying for this? Or does that matter? Or it's just a matter of just they want it for the height? They don't have to put a reason.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Harper, my apologies for not addressing that question. Through the application for building permit, I understand that there is a component of the form that requires an applicant to identify what they're proposing to use the building for. I believe common entries include store the lawnmower, store some seasonal goods and wares and sporting equipment and so forth. So the question is asked, they have to answer it. As far as the question of proof goes, I suppose that really boils down to what the end use might be once it's constructed. Whether or not the things being stored match the things that were listed in a building permit application. I wouldn't be able to answer that question. I think that would be post-construction once someone has a final on how someone chooses to use it. But it would need to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw. It would need to be accessory to the residential use of the lot. If it's used for a different purpose, whether it be, couldn't fathom, but that could very well be the subject of a complaint that we would investigate.
Okay. Any further comments or questions from council? All right. Seeing none, thank you again. We will now move on to number 3, the proposed farm employee accommodations.
All right, so the next topic that we're going to discuss is accessory farm employee accommodation. So agricultural uses is a predominant use in town. As you can see from the map itself, it covers pretty much the majority of the town. The map itself shows all the agricultural uses, which is countryside as well as extractive zone. And since the bylaw of 2010-050 came into effect, proposals for the accommodation of farm employees have evolved. Results in a change of modernization when it comes to farm practices, additional to an ongoing project that we have with King Township, which has to do with the harmonization of both zoning along the Holland Marsh. So in terms of the proposed changes that we're making is update the location in which a property can have an accessory farm employee accommodation, which includes a property having an FBR number located on the same property as the farm owner's residence or located in an existing home on a farm property. We're also proposing to remove the requirement of being 50 meters from a detached dwelling and 6 meters from any lot line, and instead replacing it with having a 15-meter setback from any lot line. There's also an update for the minimum net floor area per square per person, which is to increase it to 7.44 as to ensure it meets the suggested rate for seasonal farm worker housing guideline report. In terms of the comments received, we did receive again from Enbridge, from NBCA, BW Fire, as well as BW Corporate Services. Again, no concerns or objections were made in terms of the proposal, and we did not receive any public comments regarding this amendment at this time.
Thank you, Priscilla. All right, again, we go out to the public. It's your chance to comment on this. I will come on up, state your name and address and your concerns or your support. Or both, yeah.
Okay, this is really putting the light in my eyes, guys. Good evening, Your Worship, and everyone. As you all know, my name is Jody Mott. I'm the Executive Director of the Holland Marsh Growers Association. We actually had a board meeting last week, and we reviewed this, and the board is very thankful that you guys are looking at this. We've gone back and forth with everything, and I'm pretty sure some of my farmers here appreciate that they don't have to build a worker residents and have their coffee on their front porch looking at their workers every morning. This is a great thing that's going to help agriculture. And as you know, with everything that's going on, we're bringing more and more workers to feed Ontario and feed Canada. So we really, really need this, and we thank you for doing this. And we have no objections or questions at this time about this one. Good job. Thank you, staff.
Excellent. So Jody, there's three opportunities here, three proposed changes to this. So did you look at them, and does your association have any options they preferred? We have number one, located on a farm property having a farm business registration. Number two, located on the same property as the farm owner's residence. Or number three, located on an existing home on a farm property. So when you reviewed those, did you come up with any?
We've reviewed them, and as long as if I have a piece of property, whether it's on my farm or it's on my farm where my house is, then I'm able to utilize that piece. That's great.
Okay, perfect. Any further comments, or do you have a written statement?
We've met with staff, and you'll be
Okay,
getting
perfect.
more as well.
Perfect. Any further comments from, please?
Wanted clarification.
Yeah, come on up and state your name and address.
Christine Munshaw, farmer in the Holland Marsh. It says 15-meter setback from any property line. Is that the side property lines? Because in the marsh, like, there's a lot of narrow strips, right? So if you're going to put something, if you want to put a worker, I don't know, house or whatever, so you have to be 15 meters from each property line, front, side, back. Is that correct?
I'll look to Priscilla, but I got a nod that yes,
That's it.
it's there.
Okay. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. If you have concerns with that, please put those comments in. Okay, further comments or questions from the public? And as you recall, when it comes to the marsh, we are looking at the harmonization also of the bylaws of the zoning in the marsh, so that might take some precedent there at that, your concern there. So, okay, I'll call for a third time. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none at this time, I will turn it to council comment. Councillor Scott and Councillor Verkuyk.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments from me. Jody Mott mentioned the meeting of the board. I was appreciative of getting to come to the board. I've done that regularly over the past 4 years, and I always appreciate hearing the feedback and getting to chat through some ideas and concerns. And the 15-meter setback, to Ms. Munshaw's comment, was raised as well, and I think there is some engagement with staff about how we could make that as flexible as possible, because I see this change as part of our attempt to harmonize our bylaws and zoning with King. This one's being about cutting red tape to make farmers' jobs easier so that you can run your businesses and grow your food and feed us all, rather than having to worry about too much bureaucracy and paperwork. Later on, we're going to talk about what Councillor Verkuyk called out a few weeks ago, which is the protecting agriculture piece of what we're trying to do as well, and making sure that ag land is preserved. So I'm happy to see this. I think it does a good job of facilitating some of the concerns that have come up in recent years, including during COVID, with the on-farm housing for your workers. And I think this is a good change, but I know Councillor Verkuyk and Jody Mott and others met with staff as well about this, and I'm hopeful that things can be massaged so it's improved even more.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Councillor Verkuyk.
Yeah, I'd just like to further comment on the 15-meter setback. That would be kind of onerous in a lot of marsh properties, so I make sure that staff know that and how we can come up with a more reasonable number for that.
All right, thank you for that. Councillor Harper's next.
Thanks, Mayor. I do have a question in regards to enforcement and registration. Regarding the FBR numbers and the farmers, there's some of them sit on quite a bit of land. How would we be able to manage it? Is the onus on them to register a new dwelling or accessory building on the farmland with the town beforehand? Or what would be the protocol if they built one in back 40, or I guess depending on which decision or option that we present or we pick in the end, might have that sway as to, like, or if we pick one of the options where the building has to be on the actual farm house land, then that would be quite obvious, very, very easy to see. I know the farmers don't have an issue with that, either one,
But if I could get clarification on that.
Sorry. For you, Councillor Harper, sorry, for you first, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the construction of the farm employee accommodation, it would need to go for a building permit. And when you do go to the building division, they do check for zoning as a requirement. So they would ask to see an FBR number, for example, to ensure that they do meet the zoning requirements in order to construct accommodations for the farm employees.
And if it's found later that they didn't go through that process, what happens then?
For you, Mr. Chair, so currently right now, it would be grandfathered in a sense, and all new applications that are received regarding the accommodation will be going through this process to double check that it does meet zoning. It is a requirement. A building permit cannot be issued unless zoning is met.
Sorry, I'll be a little bit more specific. If someone builds it not grandfathered and it's new and it's discovered later, what are the protocols? If I make this out.
So thank you through your chair, Mayor Leduc, to Councillor Harper. I believe that would primarily be addressed through building staff, and the terminology escapes me at the moment, not being a building official, but essentially there is an order they can impose on the property that would require the owner to come and apply for the right permits for the building, septic, etc., to ensure that it's constructed to code.
Okay, that answers my question. I don't think anyone would do that. I'm just saying it has come up in certain areas, not here, but other municipalities and stuff. So the option, if they did build something without getting it, they would still be allowed, granted that option to apply for the permit and then come to council, even though the building might be built. So that's what you're saying?
So through your worship to Councillor Harper, if they were to build something without a permit,
Yeah.
and it were later discovered, order gets placed on the property, they would be given the chance to apply for the permit.
Okay, perfect.
If it complies with zoning, it wouldn't need to go through council or committee of adjustment. It would get zoning approval advanced through the building permit process.
I think it's deemed non-compliant first, and then they have the opportunity to become compliant if they meet all the zoning. So, okay. Further comments or questions from council? Okay. Seeing none, then we're on to section 4, which is the agricultural zone residential dwelling. Now that you're going to cover separate from 5, right?
Yes, so each one will be separate. So the next topic is the agricultural zone residential dwelling. So currently in our zoning bylaw, it identifies that detached dwellings cannot be constructed on lot ranges from 4.04 hectares and 10.1 in size. And as you can see on the map, so the parcels identified are those of those specific size dimension. And the reason why it cannot be constructed in terms of a dwelling, we kind of need to look into the histories associated to it. So if we look back into 1967, there was a bylaw that was created, 1134, that was in place saying cannot construct a detached dwelling on the property. The reason for the bylaw that was created was to ensure that prevent further land severances associated to lot divisions. So in 2002 as well as 2023 in the OP, we understand the reason and have agreed to have the same idea done for the official plan, saying that subdivision cannot take place on those lands unless there are 36 hectares in size in 2002 and increased it to 40 hectares in size in 2023. With that in mind, as a result of this, since 1967, all those dwelling areas could not have a detached dwelling on the premises. As a result, we're proposing to remove this statement altogether from the zoning bylaw in order to permit detached dwellings to be constructed there. In terms of the comments received, again, Enbridge, NVCA, BWG Fire, as well as BWG Corporate Services identify no concerns or objections. In terms of the comments from the public, we did receive a few. We did receive a comment supporting the amendments in removing the prohibition of residential developments in the countryside zone. Another comment identified the importance of preservation of rural as well as agricultural land. And then another comment was received ensuring that existing zoning exceptions are not superseded by this bylaw. The next slide just shows that we're now open for comments and questions.
Okay, we're good. Okay, we're at the public consultation again. So if there's public comments or questions on this slide, please come up, state your name, address, and state your position.
The sun's gone, we can see now. Your Worship, thank you for reviewing this, everyone. We, as a board again, did meet. We did have a conversation. Councillor Scott actually was basically the target of a lot of good questions the other night. So, and he had none of the answers, so we'll bring them to you. We can appreciate people want to put houses on these properties. The question is, what's stopping them from breaking them down into smaller acreages and putting subdivisions on them? So if I have 10 acres and I'm going to break them down into 2-acre farming area, farms, and you take 10, divide 2, you now have 5 houses. I have 25 acres and I break them down into 2, then I have more houses. So again, we could appreciate you want to put a house on there. We appreciate people want to live there, but this is a big piece of it. There's 81 properties, to my understanding, that this applies to. That's a lot of houses up in there. The other piece is, it's great people want to come and buy a piece of property beside a farm. We're going to put the house up. Guess who's farming at 2 in the morning? Guess who's harvesting? When the guys go, they go largely. It doesn't matter what crop you're doing, cover crops, anything. You've got to go largely. Cash crops again. And this, people coming from other parts of the province, Toronto loves to buy houses up here. The next second, there's a guy spraying, there's a guy cutting grass, there's a guy, his tractor's making too much noise. Again, when people need to come to Bradford, it's no different when they complain that there's a tractor going down the road. So that's our hesitation on this. We support it, but we have questions around it.
Perfect, thank you. Comments are documented. Any further comments from the public?
Mayor, Council, my name is John Hambley. I'm a 4th generation farmer in this municipality. This needs to be put into a better preference as 81 lots goes into 810 acres. It's just not a small parcel, and if there's a house put in the front of this parcel with today's farm machinery, it's very difficult to access the back part of those parcels. So you have lot frontages of between 100 and 200 feet, and your coverage of your lots, which will make it virtually inaccessible to actually farm this piece of property back in behind it. And the biggest thing is just to maintain the right to farm. Like we do some of our procedures 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, our farm actually. We have 56 different locations within the municipality, and we take it to ourselves to let the municipality know what we're doing in regards to spraying and the different people around our properties, and we're very great. The community is very grateful for the information that we give out. So, but I just want this to be taken on record that I am not against advancements within the community, but it has to be smart advancements. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you for those concerns. I will again call for the public if they'd like to comment on this. I'll make a second call for public again on this.
The age. That's not the AM you're talking about.
That's not the marsh. No, this is just the A. It's okay. You get your chance. You can come up, comment now, and do it again. It's okay. And I'll call for a third time for comments from the public. Okay, seeing none, I'll go to council. I got a Councillor for Kike first, Councillor Scott, and then Councillor Harbour.
I have a question for staff with regards to the impact on does this change anything on the restrictions on subdividing current properties in the agricultural zoning. My understanding is that it shouldn't, but I want confirmation from staff.
For you, Mr. Chair, so currently there are policies in place that prevents further subdivision of land. For example, the current OP says that you cannot subdivide unless 40 hectares, and there's also special provisions associated to it, which can only be for agricultural use, for example. It is founded on other additional policies from the province, such as the provincial planning statement, that are also in support of this. So putting a subdivision for multiple residential dwelling is not something that would be feasible under current policies.
Just a follow-up. So yeah, so this is between 4 and 10 hectares. So you said 40 hectares would be a minimum that you could start doing any kind of subdivision. So this should have no effect on it, right?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Verkuyk. Under the current official plan policies, and this originates in the county, if you have an 80-hectare parcel, 200 acres, you could divide it into two 100-acre or two 40-hectare parcels. Short of that, there are relatively few additional other opportunities, and they're very prescriptive under provincial and county policy. But 40 hectares would be the smallest lot size for agricultural use in the Highlands.
Okay, on to Councillor Scott, Councillor Harper, and then Councillor Giordano.
So I mean, I think this is well intended, and we heard from the comments that if it can work well, it's a good idea. So I just think we need to put a nice, clean set of guidelines around this to protect ag land, put this in a box, so to speak. So you want multi-generation farming to happen, whether it's the son or daughter, you build a house on the property so that they can move out of the main house. We see that happen in other places around town. I think that should be encouraged, but we don't want this to run amok and be a backdoor way to, as Ms. Ma was saying, start subdividing farms into subdivisions. We certainly don't want that.
Okay, perfect. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with my colleague and actually the sentiments from the residents that voiced their concerns on the farms. I do believe there should be a little bit more prescriptive guidelines in regards to this. Maybe not as stringent as 1967 when the Leafs won Stanley Cup, but you know, something more current. But at least so that it can't run amok. I would like to see that come back to us with some type of prescriptive guidelines that works for everybody, but doesn't let it go run afoul.
Okay, thank you. Over to Councillor Giordano, then back to Councillor Verkuyk.
Thank you. So when this came up, I was reading it, and full disclosure, I have a family in Niagara-on-the-Lake / St. Catharines, and they're farmers. So growing up, going to their massive farms, completely different lifestyle. So I had to speak to them and ask them questions, because what ended up happening was a lot of people are losing their farms for affordability purposes. And one of the ways that they can stay multi-generational on that land is to build a secondary home for their sons or daughters to continue to live. And that becomes, you know, their main house becomes their retirement. And when they pass on, then everyone kind of moves up. And that has so much value to our highlands. I think it's very important to do it, but to my other colleagues as well, we have to be careful, because what you don't want is, you know, people with deep pockets coming up from the city and buying their, their land so they can have a farm, and they'll rent the farm out to somebody to farm before them, and they can build their mega house on it. And that's a reality that will take place as well in some instances. So to put the restrictions in place, yeah, but at the same time, for the farmers, like one of the gentlemen that spoke earlier, yeah, he's got, I don't know how many, 40-something different parcels of land across that. That's a large farming property company. But some of these farmers only have their 200 or 100 acres or whatnot, and so for them to be able to have that dwelling on there will sustain that small family farming operation for a little bit longer. So I want to support this moving forward. I just hope that we find the happy medium that satisfies everybody. That's also common sense. I think it's a good thing for the right reasons.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Verkuyk.
Just want to ask staff, is there any, to address one of the concerns, let's say there's a 24 acre property, and there's 400 feet of frontage. Is there any way to make sure that the property, the 22 acres that's still farmable, that it's not landlocked, that there's a farm access point to the agriculture? I mean, it only makes sense for the owner to rent that land out to get the 25 to only pay 25% property tax, but they may build a house and then realize that their farmer has no access to the land he was renting. Is there any way that we can put that into the zoning?
For you, Mr. Chair, so we can certainly look into, I guess, setbacks in terms of distance that would have enough for example, a tractor to lease as a minimum to pass through in order to access the back of the property, so farmland isn't lost in that sense. So certainly something that we can look further into comparing different municipalities and so on.
Okay, let me go to Councilor Perugini first, and then back to you, Councilor Perugini.
Thank you. Good discussion all around and good questions that are coming up, because it comes down to the utilization of the land. From my understanding, previously when these parcels were subdivided, they took 100-acre parcels and broke them into 10-acre parcels. It's happened quite a few places in town. And then this rule was put in place that the houses weren't built on these 10-acre parcels. So right now, it only makes sense for the owners to rent them out to farmers. And if you have a 100-acre piece that a farmer is renting out all 10 acres, each 10-acre parcel from each person that owns that land, by allowing something like this, now all of a sudden, the person that's smack dab in the middle of that 100 acres decides they want to build their house, and they put it right in the middle. So getting to some of the questions that were coming over here, will there be some sort of easements? Will there be some sort of stipulations in the rules for building on this ag land that farmers can still utilize it? Can the owner of the property decide that they want to put up their big home, come from the city, put up a big home, and just say, nope, you're not touching the rest of my land, and it breaks up the farmland where it's not usable whatsoever anymore? In the actual report, it states that the maximum lot coverage is 15% for lots with a lot area of less than 4 hectares, but that's 9-something acres. So if you're at a 10-acre plus, how much lot area are they allowed to cover? Would it cover a lot more land? Would there be stipulations in, when you were talking about the road coverage, the frontage, would there be stipulations to the point where somebody wanted to build their property right smack dab in the middle of their 10 acres and have a 400-foot driveway to get there? Like, there's a lot of questions behind what's going around this, because if we do open it up, I believe people that own their own land should have some use for their own land and be able to do something. But to the point brought up from the farmers, this could open up a whole can of worms where you're going to start separating farmland where it's not going to be feasible to use it anymore in certain areas.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councilor Perugini. Beginning with the scenario that you started with, where there's a 100-acre parcel that was carved up into 10-acre strips, and where a farmer may currently benefit from being able to rent 10 contiguous 10-acre parcels. And if they're doing so, I would imagine that if those 10 parcels are under 10 different ownerships, they're having to negotiate with 10 different owners today. The proposed change to the zoning provisions would have no bearing to regulate that. If they have to get 10 separate agreements today, they would still have to get 10 separate agreements should this bylaw be passed. I suppose going to the part of what happens where there's then new homes dropped within different areas of each one of those 10 acres. Perhaps picking up on a comment that I believe Councillor Verkuyk shared, as well as Priscilla, certainly staff can take that under advisement and look into the opportunity to propose different performance standards, such as maybe it's a maximum setback from a right-of-way, keep the home close to the road, as an example. And to Councillor Verkuyk's point, there would likely be some property tax incentive to preserving as much remnant farmland to have at least the majority of their property remain eligible for the farm property class tax rate program. So a combination of external forces could help to influence where those types of developments may occur, and we can certainly take that under advisement and bring that back to council in a future report.
Just a follow-up comment. I know that in the area there have been questions brought to my attention over the past X amount of years about this situation. And that's a concern for me because right now they cannot build on them. So the only real benefit they have is to rent it out to a farmer because they can't do anything else with it. Once we put this into place, I feel like a lot of these will be developed with homes because they were bought a long time ago for peanuts and they're just sitting on them waiting for this to come into play.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Scott and then Councillor Dyke after.
I just want to emphasize Councillor Verkuyk and Councillor Ferragini's comments because these aren't edge case hypothetical speculation. This is actually happening on Morris Road right now where we have multiple acres in the original part of the Holland Marsh that aren't being farmed because there are very large estate style homes that don't provide access so that farmers can get from field to field contiguously. So we're not just inventing concerns here, it's actually happening in town already.
Yes, thank you. That's a good point. Councillor Dyke.
Yeah, those are my concerns as well. Going back in history and West Gwillimbury days, they had all these 100-acre farms were cut up in 10-acre parcels, and they were the zoning bylaw. They could not build on these 10-acre parcels. It was used for agriculture only, and not for putting homes on. So I don't want to see us open up a zoning to change it because we have a lot of. I sure like to get the stats. And years ago, I can't remember the numbers, but there's many 10-acre parcels throughout this municipality that the farmers are able to use, but they're really not made for residential. They're for agriculture use, and they were cut up way back in the 60s, 70s. I think 60s, 70s. I don't think the 80s was a big part of it, but years ago, it's our local law firms were involved in how they got cut up. But I would just hope that we don't open up a big Pandora box and that we have a handle on this. And I respect the fact that it's hard. Today's farmers need big equipment and they need that space to get into these farms. And we started adding all these monster homes on these lots because they have the room to build bungalows and it makes it harder for the farmer to get behind. So I don't want to see us get into that problem as well.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I guess, yeah, go ahead. You've got a comment to.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. If I may add just a couple of points of context as well. Certainly, Mr. McKnight's tenure with the town extends beyond mine. I've been with the town cumulatively for about 7-8 years. Have experienced many inquiries from members of the public about these 10 to 25 acre lots. From those inquiries, my experience has been that staff have consistently shared that neither is there a precedent of anyone having applied for a variance application to try to get permission to build on one of these lots, nor apply for a boundary adjustment to try to get their lot either just above or just over the threshold where building a dwelling is not permitted. And certainly Priscilla and I are taking detailed notes about the feedback being shared here this evening because part of the objective in bringing this through consultation further to the report from last August was this has not been tested through a site-specific application, and we're thankful for the chance to put this through public and council's commenting process to have a chance to consider these types of comments for consideration in a future report. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Alan. Oh, okay. We've got our Deputy Mayor Burnett first, and then Councillor Giordano again.
Thank you, Your Worship. Alan, Priscilla, thank you for the presentation. And thanks to the public for coming out and sharing your comments and concerns. Planning meetings, public planning meetings are for us to hear what public has to say, whether they speak in favor or against and I'm glad that that you're bringing those issues up. My concern is, and I appreciate that we're trying to clean up something that's from decades ago. Um, 67 bylaw from West Gwillimbury. My concern is that just because someone hasn't applied for those variances or site plans does not mean that it would not happen. It would happen, but we would have to come back with a better setbacks or restrictions that it doesn't tie the hands, because if there is a loophole or if there's an opportunity, I can assure you people will take advantage of it. And we also know, and we're not naive to it, that we don't have that many resources to proactively go after these people. It'll be always after if someone files a complaint, because our bylaws tied up with other stuff. So that's why we have to do a better job at the front end so it can go smoothly. And I'm very thankful that everyone's sharing their concerns, and especially the farming community.
Okay, thank you for those. Councilor Giordano?
Yeah, I had to go back and check my notes. So when we were, when you guys brought up the ADUs to us, and one of the comments I made back then was, I would much rather not put 4 ADUs onto a single property in and around the town and subdivisions, where some people were pretty active on that. What I was interested in doing, and maybe this is a great opportunity to consider that, is maybe not subdividing the lots and allowing construction take place, but a large-scale ADU for their residents as a consideration, as opposed to the actual subdivision of the property. So if somebody wanted to have multi-generational living, but not within the same house, maybe that's an option in the rural properties. That was a thought that, in my notes back then I was talking about, maybe that might make sense in those areas. I'm not an expert in those areas, so maybe you guys can have that as a consideration, but I'm just throwing that out there. And these ADUs are, there's people that are building homes with, I don't want to call them granny suites, whatever, but basically it's a separate home for their in-laws or their parents. So that it's detached from the house, but it's either connected to the same septic or its own septic. But basically what it's allowed to do is it allows to have multi-generational living on the same property. That was one idea. And then number two, have we looked at other municipalities that have taken strong mayor powers, and have they used this as a tool in order to get their housing targets up? Or is this, relatively new right now? Like, have other municipalities gone ahead and done this? And what's the risk to it?
Certainly, thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Giordano. Trying to tackle those in reverse order, and my apologies if I stumble. In terms of a comparative review of other jurisdictions with a similar legislative framework, the short answer is no. We've not looked at other jurisdictions that may or may not have this similar type of restriction. As Priscilla had shared, the bylaw 1134 under the former township of West Gwillimbury came out in 1967. There was not the provincial direction nor county direction. That was not introduced as a result of a provincial law or policy requirement, but I understand that was a municipal initiative that was pursued. My understanding was to disincentivize fragmentation of farmland. In terms of considering the additional opportunities for more units on rural or agricultural properties, whether it be for other family members, aging parents, what have you. Certainly the Planning Act for the longest time has allowed for municipalities to consider temporary use permissions for garden suites. The permissions begin at up to 20 years with 3-year extensions after that. The town has a process where I believe the application fee for that for a temporary use amendment is about $1,000. Which is far from cost recovery, but certainly meant to not create a heavy barrier of entry for garden suite proposals. Additionally, last October, the province updated the provincial planning statement to provide broader permissions for additional residential units on agricultural lands. And that would essentially be, in addition to the main dwelling, you could have up to, under the provincial policies, there's a support, not an as-of-right permission, a support for up to 2 additional units. The first of which has to be attached or within the main one. the third one, or the second ADU, or the third unit could be detached. That's in the provincial planning statement. There is not an as-of-right permission for that in the Planning Act or the town's zoning bylaw today. Just to clarify that point as well, a couple years prior, Bill 23 came out and it introduced overnight a change in as-of-right permissions. November 24th, 2022, I believe it was, the town's zoning provisions applied. You can have a detached home and one ADU. With Bill 23 being passed overnight, those provisions that prevented up to 2 ADUs, 3 units, were nullified, rendered null and void, superseded by the Planning Act for residential lots fully serviced in a settlement area boundary. And so we've certainly fielded a lot of questions from members of the farming community who've inquired about the provincial planning statement cracking the door open on additional units in agricultural areas, and some potential confusion that may have arisen by virtue of the Bill 23 provisions that only apply to serviced residential lands. But that's certainly something that the town could explore through whether it be growth management or through a separate planning exercise to explore accessory dwelling unit permissions in agricultural areas.
Good. Yeah. You want to go follow up? Sure.
So one more, I don't, and this might be bylaw or someone else, but we do not allow Airbnbs to operate on agricultural land, correct? In town. And my other concern is that you start opening this up and it becomes a whole nother sense of tourism that's brought to these areas that really are a place of work for many people. And
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Giordano, the short answer would be that the town's zoning bylaw since 2010 has provided a somewhat broad permission for bed and breakfast establishments in the agricultural zone. That's the direct answer, but there's a caveat. Bed and breakfast establishments are subject to other general provisions that would apply, and I don't have those provisions directly in front of me at the moment. But I do believe, if I recall correctly, that they require the owner-operator to reside in the premise, that a certain number of guest rooms could be eligible to be rented out. Although I know that the term Airbnb could be considered to apply to a broad range of different bedroom types, unit types, property types, but the town's general provisions do provide some level of prescription with bed and breakfast establishments.
I smell a staff report coming from this in the future. So I'll continue to work offline with you on that, Alan. Thanks.
Okay. Perfect. Any further comments? Councillor Dykey.
Alan, just a clarification question, because if a farmer has 50 acres, even 100 acres, and they have their principal residence on this 100-acre parcel or 50-acre parcel, just for clarification, because years ago, back in the day, they used to, some of the farmers, to survive or help their farm, they were able, back in the day, to sever a lot off their farm, and that was for their children, or when they went to community adjustments, that was the application that they were that's how they got these lots, and they were able to build homes. Some people sold them, some people kept them. Up to how many residents, and I know you talk about accessory building onto the primary residence, but can a home be built other than a mobile unit with a solid foundation under our bylaw? Like, you have a home, and let's say you want to your children want to build a home on the same deed. Does it have to be a mobile, or can it be a structural dwelling?
Okay, I'm going to let you answer, but we're getting off topic. We're trying to stick to the agricultural zone residential. You guys are getting the ADU stuff, so you're getting to different topics. So go ahead, Alan, give it an answer, and then we have to stick to the topic.
Certainly. Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Dykey, I believe under the zoning bylaw and the Planning Act, the intention is for a garden suite to be a constructed dwelling unit. I do believe there's a general prohibition on the use the inhabitation of a recreational trailer as a form of habitation on a property. And so I do believe that it would be a form of unit that would require a permit typically on a foundation connected to well, connected to septic and so forth. And that would not be something that is currently allowed as a right across the board. That is something that would have to go through council for a temporary use permission.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. No further comments, questions. Thank you. We're going to move on to 5, the Marsh Agricultural Zone dwelling units.
All right, so for Marsh Agricultural Zone residential dwellings, so currently detached dwellings cannot be constructed on lots that are greater than 4 hectares in the Marsh Agricultural Zone. So the picture on the left, similar to before, represents all the parcels that are currently within that size that was identified. So to understand this again, we need to look at the background and how it came to be. So going back to 1985, when the town of West Gwillimbury permitted the construction of residential dwellings. And while bylaw 1134 was in force, it actually did not have any impact on marsh agricultural lands. And in 2005, the Greenbelt plan identified that detached dwellings were permitted only on lots that were in existence on February 20th of 2005. In 2010, the town zoning bylaw introduced this restriction. We, however, don't know why it was introduced, as it wasn't founded on policy. So with that in mind, we are proposing to remove this statement altogether. In terms of the comments that were received to date, again, Enbridge, NVCA, BW Fire, as well as BW Corporate Services have no comments. Several comments were received from the public. There was a comment supporting the amendment of removing the prohibition of residential development. Someone did mention and express concern of an opposition for including the protections of soils as well as specialty crop area. And again, they want to preserve the agricultural land.
Okay, thank you for that. And we will now open up the public again. Please come up.
Your Worship, Council, I'm going to use a pun. This is the hot potato. We sat around a boardroom table, and this was not pretty. It's so every piece around it. So right now, you're saying that there's 79 lots. If we take 2 acres of each of those lots, a prime agriculture marsh muck that is the pride of Ontario and Canada, and let people build houses, you're taking 158 acres prime agricultural land that is protected by the Greenbelt that we fought to get into the Greenbelt. The 210, I believe, was a request because people were starting to put houses up, and that was a stop to it. I can't find it back. We tried to find it, but I believe that's the piece around it. So we're in the process, and we know that this work was started before we were able to get the group together with King and Bradford to look at the bylaws and what it would look like and what it would do. We would like to make a recommendation to council and to staff to take this back to that group to look at it, because there's so many pieces of it. I can lift up, I have 8 questions on my sheet, but I'm sure you're going to hear more and more. Just basically, does this go with the provincial MDS guidelines? How much agricultural land can we keep losing? You're hearing the conversation previous to this bylaw of the previous bylaw. Our farmers are allowed to build on their property now based, if you have one house, they can build an attached house and a second house as well for their people. Again, somebody's going to go build some houses on this. They're turning them into Airbnbs. This is your factory. This is your growing area for your vegetables. I understand that some people need to put a house there, but how much farmland can we give up? And marsh muck, you're not going to find it. You're the second largest carrot growing area to California, guys. And this is really, really important. So as we move forward, we would like to see that this there's going to be a lot of discussion. I know the people coming behind me are very passionate about this conversation. Jonathan, Councillor Scott can tell you, and Councillor Verkuyk, this again is a very hot topic, and we'd like to make a motion, or if you guys can take it and bring it into the working group, it would be, I think, a really good idea at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I will ask for further comments from the public. Come forward.
No. Okay, my husband and I have been farming in the marsh for 50 years. I'm very emotional about it. The muck is very dear and near to us, and to see it potentially be just like there's too much houses there now that are non-farm occupied, and the respect for the land, and it's just not there. So I was really kind of taken back when I seen this about modernizing zoning provisions and provide housing options in underutilized areas. That really bothered me. I don't consider agriculture AM being underutilized. I mean, for houses, yes, but houses don't belong in the marsh. And it wouldn't hurt me at all if we never seen another house be built in the marsh. Because for future generations to be farming there, we have to do something now. We have to think of those future generations so they can provide us with food down the road. Our produce goes from coast to coast in Canada. It gets south of the border. It's a very, very important industry. And you have a golden nugget in your backyard. And if you could just reconsider all this.
Yeah, good comments. Thank you for that. I will ask for further public comments. Any further public comments? Come on up, Dave.
Good evening, councillors. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dave Muncha. I live in the Holland Marsh, 1241 Canal Road. I am very passionate as well about farming in the marsh. Between my dad, my mom, and I, we farm around 300 acres of carrots and onions. It is a lot. Right now, we already have a lot of, struggles in the marsh trying to farm around properties, or farm around houses, or farm around people from Toronto that come up and buy a house in the marsh and they don't even know what the marsh is. Okay? And there's a lot to this. This is black marsh muck, and we want to put up houses here. It's ridiculous. Like, yes, there are houses here. Yes, the forefathers, or what do you want to call it, the former farmers in the marsh put up dwellings. They put up small dwellings. They put up like to utilize as much land as they can. The last 10, 15, 20 houses I've seen go up in the marsh, both King and Bradford, are monsters. They're building mansions. So it's crazy what we're even talking about here by suggesting that we're utilizing farmland to build houses. I guess I got off topic there a bit. I am part of the Holland Marsh Drainage Board. I am part of the Holland Marsh Growers Association Board. I am on Bradford District Co-op Board. I am a part of the 100th Anniversary Holland Marsh Committee. I am a part of the Bylaw King Township Bradford Committee. So like I'm very informed, or very, engaged into this community or this farming operation. I just think it's going down this route. I don't know. I want to farm for years. I'm 37 years old. I plan on farming until the day I die. I need farmland to farm. If you build houses and I can't afford to buy or can't afford to rent because rent's going up too, let alone property. Currently right now, there's a lady next door to me that has a farm, a 5-acre piece of farm. She told me it's a building lot. I have offered her the most money I've ever offered for a piece of land, and she said it isn't even close. So what am I supposed to do to grow for the future and to grow food for Canadians and keep food here too, now that we're dealing with, we all know. Anyway, but yeah, I am just, we really got to watch what we're doing here. Really, you know, again, that is my mom, and she did say it wouldn't hurt my feelings too if not another house was built in the marsh. That being said, farm help buildings is important as well, and same with carrot and onion storages are very important. But again, I've been watching what's been going around in the marsh, and there's been a numberous amount of farm buildings that they wrote on the building application that it's a farm building, and it's a plumbing pipe supply storage. It's a marijuana grow up, which is a bylaw against. It's I don't know. We couldn't. Grenzer Road has 3 buildings that the township said it's okay. So there's things like this that don't need to be in the marsh, and just to start even saying that there's 100 plus or whatever houses that could be put in the marsh, this is crazy. Like, we should really look at this with, I don't know. That's what I got.
I'm on your side, Dave, so help me, because I want to go after every illegal business in the marsh. I want to go after everybody that's legal in there. So there's going to be a lot of upset people, but we want to go after them. I do want to protect the marsh too. Okay, any further comments or questions? Come on up.
Hi again. This is not necessarily a point of contention, more a seek to understand, and maybe the farmers can inform me later. If someone was to buy anything on a marsh and build monster homes like they're saying, if my understanding is farmland property tax is a lot less, if they build a home on there, does that property the property tax change? And if it does, if they have multiple homes like they're planning, then it gets equally divided? Second, again, I'm a bit ignorant to this. Can you build on my marsh? My understanding is it's wetland, is it not? So obviously it can be, and I'm with the farmers on this. Can muck be moved? Can it be like, or is it built in? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, those are a lot of questions. You come to your counselor, you can come to the Counselor Verkuyk or Counselor Scott or Counselor Giordano. We'll get to those answers for sure, but yes, if you build, that becomes a residential lot. It becomes a different tax system. Can't move the muck. There's all sorts of things. We want to protect the marsh, and I'm thinking that's what you're getting at.
Right.
We certainly want to do that too. So.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any further comments or questions from the public? Third and final call for any further comments or questions from the public. All right, seeing none, we'll go right to council. Councilor Verkuyk, then Councilor Scott, Giordano, Councilor Harper.
Yeah, I agree with the first commenter about maybe including this with the harmonization process. And one of the things to look at is this 4 hectare limit, this 10-acre thing, it actually makes less sense to be able to build on a smaller piece of property than it does to be building on a bigger piece. So hopefully we'll look at all of the properties and see what the impact is, because why should someone be able to build on a 9-acre property but not on an 11-acre property? Maybe they shouldn't be able to build on either piece of property. Especially, yeah, even, you know, there's a lot of 5 and there's a lot of farm properties in the marsh that are less than 10 acres because people when the marsh opened up in the 30s, people could survive off of 10 acres. Now you need 300 acres to feed a family. So there's all these 10-acre and less lots all over the place. So we should probably look at that as well.
Okay, excellent. We got Councilor Scott and Councilor Giordano and then Councilor Harper.
So I guess I have a question, which is what prompted this, right? Because I think we all agree that we want to protect the Holland Marsh. We don't want to see all these 100-odd homes being permitted. And so I don't know where that would have come from. There are other parts of the marsh, so to speak, the Schomburg area or what have you, where there's a mix of uses in there. And so I'm wondering, is this a way too broad attempt to do something specific for some reason that came forward that I'm just not aware about? why are we trying, and this is a question for you, Mr. Weeb, I don't know why we're doing this, so I have to imagine there was some reason behind doing it, and maybe we need to go back to that particular property owner and try and do it on a much more targeted way.
Sure thing. Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Scott. So this was intended to be part of a proactive effort to identify areas in the zoning bylaw that have been the subject of question, inquiry, variance application, not in compliance with provincial legislation such as the AODA barrier-free parking restrictions. The marsh, I would characterize both the agricultural zone piece that we just touched on, as well as the marsh agricultural zone piece, collectively as the countryside residential restrictions. As we know, those were introduced in 1967 under the former township of West Gwillimbury, not the result of provincial or county direction through policy or legislation, and therefore zoning restrictions that have existed since 1967 and then in a more restrictive way since 2010. So as Priscilla had shared through her presentation, in 2010, the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury's first consolidated zoning bylaw actually introduced a greater level of restriction for marsh agricultural zoned properties than previously existed under West Gwillimbury. The restriction was no dwellings on a 10 to 25 acre parcel. In 2010, only in the marsh ag zone, no dwellings on anything more than 10 acres. So the purpose of this, and going back to part of what I shared earlier, having several years of experience with the town being faced with many questions on this very type of subject, what's the origin? What if I go through a variance? What if I go through a boundary adjustment? Can I ask council for a rezoning? Part of the purpose for this is to ideally seek feedback from council and the public as to what might be within the community's tolerance to potentially provide some flexibility to these restrictions in a consistent way, rather than individual landowners coming up one by one with individual proposals having to go through, let's say, arguably 80 different zoning amendments, putting it before the community in a single consolidated way, and exploring what council and the community's tolerance might be, and thoughts on potential for restrictions as we're hearing this evening.
Thanks. My follow-up would just be, and I'm going to probably just try and say it a little more bluntly, I don't think any of us, or certainly I don't, want to see more housing built on ag land, especially in the marsh where it's the muck soil, and I'm not even sure the foundations hold on some of the houses we've seen that try to get built, but there are some other pieces within the marsh that I know we've tried to clean up in other ways. And I mentioned Schaumburg earlier because there was a bunch of zoning on one particular property there where it was commercial, residential, industrial, all in one, I think. And if we're trying to do something like that where we're cleaning up a specific site to facilitate economic development, that makes sense, but I wouldn't do it globally across the whole marsh. And so I guess my question, just to put a finer point on it, is if there are specific property owners who need something specific, I think we need to be informed of that on a specific case-by-case basis, not on a do it across the marsh, throw the baby out with the bathwater risk. So I'm trying not to name anyone in particular, but if there is a major employer in an area of what is considered the marsh, because the marsh is a lot bigger than the average person thinks, let's look at that specifically and separately from impacting the whole marsh and getting people nervous that we're suddenly trying to build a bunch of houses in the marsh. So I don't know if you're able to answer that slightly more direct question, but that's where I'm coming from.
Certainly. So through your worship to Councillor Scott, so yes, we have been contacted by folks who have aspirations to construct dwellings on lots that don't currently have permissions. And that's where an example of where, rather than putting a site-specific application before council, which might be perceived as being precedent-setting, to ask council and the community broadly, what might the tolerance be to provide broader permissions or not. And if the conclusion would be that there isn't a tolerance, then that's certainly part of the feedback that we're taking note of, and part of what council would have the opportunity to make a decision on at the point where a recommendation is brought forward.
I'll just make one final comment. I get that, that makes sense, but it's much harder for me to say yes to something that impacts everything in one fell swoop than it would be for me to look at a specific issue and say, okay, on the individual merits of this, I can see how it makes sense. And your comment about precedent setting, we can find ways to limit that precedent to whatever extent we need. So I guess all I'm trying to say is I don't like this. But if there's a specific impetus or rationale that someone is after, I'd rather deal with that as a localized question than impacting everyone else.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Giordano. Councillor Gini after.
Man, the amount of times we get to the same spot from different approaches. So here's how I look at it. You look at California. Now, I'm not a fan of California for a lot of reasons, but one of the things they do is they lock down their agricultural areas, especially their prime agricultural areas, and therefore they're continue to produce. People invest in the production of the areas because they know that it is what it is and it's not going to change. We used to have a traffic and safety committee. Imagine if there was 100, 200 homes in this area, the amount of money that we're gonna have to spend to try to fix and upgrade and change now, because you don't have people just working there, you have a whole bunch more people living in that area. Those roads are not designed for heavy traffic and this and that. We're gonna have to be constantly looking at how to deal with that. I don't know. I'm not a fan of kind of not taking that approach. The marshes, when you have a gem, you polish it, right? You keep it the way it is. You enhance it. You don't sit there and try to chip away at it. It doesn't make sense. What I was trying to get at now, and I think Councillor Scott was talking to it, we need to be smart and strategic. We can't look at blanketing solutionings for this area because it's going to have negative consequences, I think, to what our intentions are. If there's something that's driving this, if there's something specific, we need to identify those areas. We need to basically specifically address those areas and then lock it down. We have to lock down the marsh. We want this marsh for the next 500 years to be producing and not to be chipped away.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Harper and Councillor Ferragini.
Thanks, Mayor. Alan, great points for bringing this up. I think right now we got to really talk about the Holland Marsh isn't really up for negotiation. I think that's pretty clear with our farmers, with our purpose in this country and our council. We've established that we want to protect farmland. This policy right here gives us that exact staple to do that. I mean, this is really sacred ground. You know, it's feeding our province, anchoring our identity right here in Bradford, West Gwillimbury for the country. And if we don't stand up and protect it for this, we need to have zero tolerance kind of prescription of nature here. You're asking for comments, and I'd like to have something around a zero tolerance zoning around this agricultural land, and that be an option for you to present to us as one to choose for this council. This is where we make that stand. This is where we make that implemented protective act for farmland right here. I agree with the farmers here. If we don't protect the farmland, it's just going to be taken away, or they'll find loopholes like my colleague suggested. Any type of, what I would like to see is if anybody wants to have any type of zoning amendment, it has to go through a prescriptive chain and it has to be brought to council. That way we do get to act on it. That way we do get to protect the farmland per se, and no houses do get built there without our say. I know you wanted to make it more flexible, but I think this is the one where we don't make it flexible. Those are my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Ferragini.
Thank you. We're constantly talking about protecting our agricultural land, and ag land is disappearing at an alarming rate. And this type of ag land you won't find anywhere else. To Mr. Munshaw's comments about the cost, farming is a generational business. You don't just, at your age especially, you couldn't just say, I want to be a farmer and afford to do it nowadays. You can't. It's absolutely impossible because of how much the land costs. You can't do it. So it's a generational approach. There are young people who would like to get into it and they can't because it's just unaffordable. And it's because of people treating them like building lots, people treating parcels like building lots. That's not what this is meant for. So I am in favor of staff having conversation with the steering committee or the committee that's dealing with the amalgamation rules, because then you'll have a lot more opinions from farmers that actually work the land. So it makes sense to listen to them. As well as, oh man, I just lost that thought. Oh, 2010. So 2010, there was a further restriction. It's unclear as to why there was a further restriction, and I'm just curious. There's 3 members on this table that were on council in 2010. Sandu, you were probably there maybe just after it happened. I don't know. Do you recall this conversation? Do you recall why those restrictions were put in place? Because when I see the fact in 1967, the Highlands haven't been touched since then, and we're looking at some really old rules, and it's like, oh, maybe we should look back at that and see if we can build some homes. We're talking 2010. It's been brought up to council, not too distant past, talking 15 years, and they put further restrictions. There's a reason for that. I don't know if any of the councilors here can comment on that.
I look around, well, I can't recall 100%, but I can tell you that 1967, the restrictions weren't strict enough. That was way back, so I think we improve as we move along. We always try to improve our restrictions and improve our bylaws, our zoning, the whole bit. So I can't really recall what the impetus was of it, but it's about improving the zoning and ensuring that you protected those marshlands. Those marshlands were protected. They were a critical part to Bradford, so they were further restrictions put on it. So I'm okay with what we have. I see what what we said. I hear what Jody said about bringing it to the committee through the harmonization process. I think that's the best way to do it. I think it's the best way to do it with this one, because you do have the working group that's working through that. So I think it works best because we should harmonize with King for sure on this one. To stop what Dave said, with you drive there now, there is mansions all over there. You see them on certain parts of the marsh. So I think it's something we can drive through that harmonization. So I would suggest that we pass this to them. So they've got, it's a public meeting, so staff are hearing us, and I think they can refer this back to that harmonization group, and we can work with it from there. So if there's any further comments from council, I think it was a good conversation. I think the message was sent. We can work through that. Okay, so I will close this then. So we're at the point then. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Priscilla. So folks, we're at the point where further action, council will not make a decision on this matter tonight, but will receive the staff report for information. The matter will be referred back to staff for a further recommendation report at a later date. So folks, I have a recommendation. That report, PLN 2025-19, regarding town-initiated zoning bylaw amendment, file number D14-24-9, relating to barrier-free parking standards, height for accessory buildings in residential zones, accessory farm employee accommodations, and restrictions on residential dwellings in countryside zones for all lands in the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury be received, and that the marsh agricultural zone residential dwelling be referred back to the working group, the harmonization zoning, and that the comments made at the public meeting and or submitted in writing be received for information purposes, and that the Office of the Community Planning consider the matters raised and addressed the same in a future recommendation report. So folks, I added something to this, and if we're good with that, with the little add that I made, that we send the number 5 back to the committee, the working group, okay? So I need a mover second then. Moved by Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Verkuyk. Question concerns? All in favor? Carried. Perfect. Okay, folks, moving right along. Follow-up. It is recommended that all comments or questions on planning applications be submitted in writing to planning@townofbwg.com. Written submissions are not required at a public meeting, but can be made at a later date and will be accepted up to the date that council makes a decision on the matter. Written submissions on planning matters will not be read at the council meeting, but will be forwarded to planning staff for consideration and or response. Council will be apprised of all public comments received prior to making a decision on the application. If you wish to receive information on the specific planning application or to be notified of an upcoming meeting related to a planning matter, please email plan@townofbwg.com. Okay? We're on to 5, confirm proceedings. Recommendation of the bylaw 2025-42, a bylaw to confirm proceedings of the council meeting dated April 29, 2025 be enacted. Moved by Councilor Perugini, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We have an adjournment. Recommendation of the meeting is hereby adjourned at, somebody got the time? 8:45. Moved by Councilor Dykey, seconded by Councilor Harper. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Geraldine. Councilor Dehaney, I'm sorry, I should have got you on the, I should have got you on one of the last two. Have a good night.
That's okay. Good night.